Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the May 14th Coronavirus Press Conference, Monroe County Health Administrator Penny Caudill announced that Monroe County would be lifting its local COVID-19 restrictions starting Monday, May 17th. She cited new guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that people who are fully vaccinated no longer need to wear a mask.
The CDC announced yesterday that those who are fully vaccinated do not need to wear a mask or physically distance except where required by federal, state, local rules, regulations, including local businesses or workplace guidance. Now, there are some exceptions, and that could be if somebody is immunocompromised, then they certainly should still wear a face covering or a mask. There are going to be places where they are still required or recommended. But if you go down this list, you will see that if you were fully vaccinated, you get to do so much, and you can do these things safely, in a much more safe manner than if you were unvaccinated, where you still need that mask or face covering.
Caudill clarified that fully vaccinated residents will still be allowed to wear masks and that local businesses and government buildings may still require masks be worn inside. She also added that residents who have not yet started or finished their vaccine are still required to wear a mask or face covering. The Bloomington Redevelopment Commission discussed renovations at Cascades Park. At the May 17th meeting, Bloomington Parks and Recreation Operations Director Tim Street presented plans to build a new trail connecting parts of Lower Cascades Park. He said the fund would support Phase 5 of an ongoing park renovation project.
Phase 5 is meant to provide trail connectivity from Clubhouse Drive in Cascades Park, south to Miller Showers eventually. So this project is taking on a quarter-mile section of trail there, as well as installing an accessible boardwalk up to the waterfall shelter with a viewing platform and trail roundabout at the base of that. It was also addressing some of the worst erosion in Cascades Park along the western bank, so that is the bank opposite of the road. Particularly from the gravel area that people informally know as the waterfall parking lots, up north to the main pedestrian bridge that connects the south end of the playground over to the waterfall shelter.
Street said the proposed boardwalk would help make the Cascades waterfall more accessible. Commissioner Deb Hutton worried that the distance to the boardwalk would still make the path inaccessible to many residents. Commissioner Cindy Canarney pointed out that people with mobility barriers currently have zero accessibility to the waterfall. Street said the boardwalk would not fix this entirely, but it would still be an improvement.
Currently, if you've ever been on the trail up to the waterfall, it's very rugged, dirt, lots of tree roots, things like that through that area. So we are making a vast improvement in the accessibility, as well as the trail that runs south from the parking lot does not even make it all the way to the waterfall shelter. It runs into grass before it gets there. So that's a big part of the improvement.
The commissioners approved the resolution unanimously. The Richland Bean Blossom School Board talked about building a new trail at its May 17th meeting. Superintendent Dr. Jerry Sanders introduced the trail, which would run from State Road 46 to Edgewood High School.
We have been working with the town of Ellettsville to construct a trail which will come up from 46 up Poplar Drive and then turn on a school drive to Edgewood Drive and on up to the high school.
Board member Brad Tucker asked what the end goal of the trail is. Dr. Sanders said the trail would eventually connect Edgewood High School with Edgewood Junior High School.
The next phase will be working on a path, a trail, sidewalk, whatever you want to call it, between the high school and the junior high, and make that connection there. We do have a lot of students who walk between the junior high and high school, and we would like to provide a safe place for them to do that. We are in the process of looking for additional grants to fund that next phase.
Board members voted to approve the MOU unanimously. At the May 18th Monroe County Community School Corporation Board meeting, Board member Cathay Fuentes-Rohr presented several policies regarding weapons for second reading. She explained that under the new policies, resource officers would no longer be allowed to carry firearms on school property.
At the last board meeting, the board asked to be provided policies for second and final reading that would eliminate carry permissions for our school resource officers while on school property. In addition, the board expects that when Dr. Hauswald begins his position this summer, we will continue this conversation about student safety, discipline policies, and the social emotional health of our students as we set our board goals and priorities with him.
Board member Martha Street moved to delay the vote. She suggested the board make this decision alongside the new superintendent. Street's motion did not receive a second. Board member April Hennessy spoke to the importance of supporting these policies. She said MCCSC needs to show that schools are safe without using firearms.
Part of why I feel really strongly about this policy. You know, rather than fear, I hope, and I have always hoped since my time in the district, that we will front load our schools with the language of expectation and possibility. And if we say that schools are safe, then we have to lean into that. And using the language or the tactics of the carceral system just inherently contradict that assertion and that presumption.
Board members voted to pass the policies 6-1, with board member Street voting nay. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
Let's talk about sex.
What is consent?
And what's not?
Consent is based on choice.
Consent is active, not passive.
Consent is giving permission without feeling pressure.
What is not consent?
Silence.
Passed out.
Intoxicated.
Fear.
Is
It is not consent.
God consent?
Ask.
Sex without consent is a crime. Only yes means yes.
Welcome back to CATSweek. The Monroe County Plan Commission discussed extending a PUD on Harrisburg Road. At the May 18th meeting, Assistant Director of the Planning Department, Jackie Nestor Jellin, said the owners of the Harrisburg PUD had submitted a pre-design request on the property. She noted that the PUD had reached the county's legal time limit of 10 years without work. Plans for construction on the PUD had begun in 2001.
Just to give you a little bit of background about this particular PUD, it was approved in 2001 to allow for 10 duplexes. It was after an outline plan is approved, they filed a development plan, and that was approved but never completed. In 2005, they came back and amended that outline plan for an approval to allow for 9 fourplexes. The development plan again was approved but never completed. Fast forward to today, and they have requested a pre-design for consideration of 9 duplexes. And the utilities are partially completed on the site, though we would have some consideration of building that up to current standards. So since the time has lapsed, and therefore the Plan Commission can operate under Chapter 811-4E3.
Nestor Jellin said the commission would have to approve an extension on the PUD or else it would need to be rezoned. She said expired PUDs do not have a default zone. Commissioner Jeff McKim used this as an example of why the commission should move away from using PUDs.
This just seems to be another example of why we've been wanting to try to discourage PUDs going forward. It just, I mean, am I wrong? Does this not just add another layer of managerial or administrative burden and complexity on the staff? I mean, we had this dispute, or this, not dispute, but this discussion relatively recently, and I think a petitioner kind of questioned why we would ever want to discourage PUDs, but I think this is an example here. It just, by creating these unique zoning ordinances for each little parcel of land, we're just creating a huge burden for ourselves and being able to manage it effectively and taking away time from other projects the staff needs to be working on.
The Plan Commission will continue discussion of expiring PUDs at its next meeting. At the May 18th Bloomington Board of Public Safety meeting, Bloomington Fire Chief Jason Moore talked about the fire department's response times. He said the department will begin tracking the time between receiving a dispatch and leaving the fire station.
That is one of the few things in our world that we can control. I can't control where the emergency is. I can't control traffic. I can't control construction, but we can control how quickly do we get on the truck. And for that, emergent fire calls, we're looking at 80 seconds or less. And for EMS calls, 60 seconds or less. And the reason being, for fire calls, you have to put on more gear.
Commissioner Luis Fuentes-Rohr asked Moore if he felt the department was properly covering Bloomington. Moore replied that the city is covered well, but the department is always looking for more opportunities for better coverage.
We are very good with what we have now, but we are looking at all those trends and making sure that we stay ahead of those trends so that we do not have a problem.
The Board of Public Safety meets again on June 15th. Monroe County Health Administrator Penny Caudill shared non-coronavirus-related updates with the Health Department at the May 19th Monroe County Board of Health meeting. She said the county has received money for a program to help HIV-positive residents receive continuous care.
But we also got a small amount of money for what's called Lost to Care program, and that is really dealing with people who have HIV infection and ensuring that they get and stay in care, medical care. And so sometimes people, for whatever reason, maybe they have that initial appointment, maybe they move or something, and now they're not getting any kind of treatment or care. So it really helps with case management to ensure people are getting the health care that they need.
Board member Mark Norrell suggested that the board meet fully in person for their next meeting. He said doing so would signify that fully vaccinated people are safe to do so.
If we're in the blue and the CDC says that fully immunized people can get together, then I think that that's something that we ought to consider is, showing that, sort of publicly that's okay.
Board members agreed. The next Board of Health meeting is scheduled for June 15th. The Monroe County Commissioners discussed adopting hybrid meeting protocols. At the May 19th meeting, Attorney Margie Rice presented a resolution to allow for some people to attend future Monroe County Board and Commission meetings virtually. Commissioner Julie Thomas talked about the importance of allowing people to attend from home. She said if COVID-19 is still a problem, this is the safest option.
We had this discussion last night at the Plan Commission meeting, and a couple of members were like, we should all be present. And, that would be ideal, but, I think it's better to not all be present because that could be a health risk for folks. And if anyone is immunocompromised and is a participant or a member of a board or a commission, that's a big ask. And so this gives us that leeway to make sure that people are protected.
Rice clarified that this acts as a blanket resolution to other Monroe County boards and commissions. She said passing this resolution allows groups that could not meet before June 1st to still have a hybrid meeting and allows them to pass a resolution that better fits each group.
Our plan is that what the commissioners are doing today will apply to all governing bodies and that they'll be able to hold those meetings after June via an electronic format, and that this is sort of a stopgap measure until they can adopt their own governing policy. I do read the law that every governing body has to adopt its own policy. We're hoping that by the executive and legislative body of the whole county allowing this for those governing bodies, that will get us through until such time as they can do that.
The commissioners approved the resolution unanimously. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
For hurting families in Monroe County.
A contribution to children who are vulnerable and in need of an advocate.
A staff that goes above and beyond to support and advocate for children in need of services.
The web of remarkable people who are dealing with difficult situations.
So many young people that are in need of help and trying to find a stable family, a stable place to live. Without the causes to make that happen, many of them would be unable to find a good home.
I love being that voice for the child who can't speak for themselves in court.
It takes me out of my comfort zone and it also helps others.
CASA means supporting our community.
Being a CASA is making sure that your village is healthy and whole, and that the children in your village will someday be able to help the village as well.
A child who doesn't have a voice, maybe in their family situation or a school situation, now has a voice that can advocate for them.
I really enjoy working with children that are going through difficult times and letting them know that I care about their future.
We are privileged with our charge of representing the best interest of children. And so therefore we can advocate for exactly what they need without restriction, focusing on their best interest.
I want to repair the world one child at a time.
Welcome back to CATSweek. The Bloomington City Council discussed annexation at its May 19th meeting. Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie explained that this process is a continuation of the same process started in 2017. She said the city has already done some of the required actions.
So by the time the process was stopped in 2017, the annexation statutes required us to take certain actions that we had already taken. We had gone halfway through. We had held 6 public outreach meetings, adopted the fiscal plans and introduced ordinances for the proposed areas. And we had scheduled and noticed, but not yet held the public hearing.
Council member Sue Scambaluri showed concern over the annexation date. She pointed out that residents annexed in 2024 would not be represented in the 2023 City Council elections. Guthrie replied that an earlier date had been considered, but there were concerns that it may not be enough time for residents to prepare for the change from county to city limits.
We considered 2023, but we wanted to add as much time as possible under the statute for a transition period for both the city and the residents who may ultimately be annexed. And we can't go beyond that because there's a limit of 3 years. That's as far as you can go out. So, and we're halfway through a year now. So we didn't feel it was advisable to shorten that transition period.
Council member Steve Volan brought up redistricting. He questioned Council Steve Unger on whether City Council would have to redistrict multiple times in 2023.
The annexation ordinances do address the redistricting requirement. Certainly your redistricting obligations with respect to the annexation areas can depend on what areas are ultimately annexed, whether that is with or without a remonstrance. And so you're not obligated to redistrict, before you complete an annexation. What the ordinances contemplate is certainly it would be within your discretion when you get to doing your redistricting next year, if you could take that into account. In how you craft your boundary or how you craft your council districts and the effective date of different portions of those districts. But yes, it would be something, certainly to the extent that the annexation impacts the population factors and they get above the 10% and all those things, you can be required to redistrict if you haven't addressed it before the effective date of the annexations.
The public hearing for annexation is set for August 4th. The Monroe County Redevelopment Commission also discussed annexation at its May 19th meeting. Commissioner Lisa Abbott asked about how annexation would affect Monroe County's TIF districts. She worried some of the TIFs would be broken up into pieces once city limits are redrawn.
So Jeff, what about the other goals in the TIF plans? They're going to leave us with bits and pieces of these TIF districts, and are we going to need to amend those plans? It's kind of interesting to me when I look at this map, what they chose to keep and what they chose to not annex.
County Attorney Jeff Cockrell recommended commissioners have a more detailed conversation once the city is further in the annexation process. Commissioner Jim Shelton pointed out the difficulty in making decisions on projects before the city votes on annexation.
The mayor's position has basically been, in general, we've got 2.5 years after, more than 2 years to work these issues out once things are approved. And that's true. But you know, if we wanted to decide whether, if we had to decide whether to continue the Fullerton Pike extension or not, we would need to do it now.
Commissioner Iris Kiesling asked if any of the City Council members were tuned into annexation talks. Monroe County Council member Jeff McKim answered that all City Council members were.
In response to the question about City Council members, I believe that all City Council members at this point are going to be pretty highly engaged in the annexation debate. I've certainly heard several others talk about it and be interested in feedback on it.
The next Redevelopment Commission meeting will be in person on June 16th. The Bloomington Environmental Commission discussed the city's Climate Action Plan. Assistant Director of Sustainability, Lauren Travis, presented the Climate Action Plan as presented to the City Council. She identified solar energy as a major goal of the plan.
Really, the big ideas here are like increasing solar generation, increasing energy efficiency, supporting our utility decarbonization, and then increasing financing options for other sectors across the city to work on getting solar and energy efficiency. So the big move in this category will be continuing to accelerate installation of solar PV photovoltaics. So while there's been an ongoing support for community members that own homes to learn about solar through Solarize information sessions, we also, through some city funding, launched this loan and grant program for nonprofits and community institutions. And this is to meet the need because nonprofits are not eligible for the federal tax credit on solar. This creates an additional incentive with the grant that they receive to get some of these improvements on their facilities completed.
Travis also talked about efforts to encourage composting. She said Bloomington is looking for opportunities to set up private and community composting drop-off sites.
There are currently drop-off sites on a pilot basis at Monroe County Solid Waste District. So anyone that is willing to purchase a subscription for drop-off can compost, whether they're in an apartment or otherwise, and drop it off in a variety of different locations, wherever it's closest to you. In the last year, we worked on a leaf composting pilot. So working with more neighborhoods to process their leaves on site so that we don't have to pick them up and have them composted elsewhere. And that's a very fuel-intensive process. And then looking at other opportunities.
The next Environmental Commission meeting is scheduled for June 17th. At its May 21st meeting, the Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals discussed its decision to deny a signage permit. Zoning and Long-Range Planner Keegan Gulick presented an appeal of a previous decision to deny permissions to build a signpost on West 3rd Street. He said the PUD was limited to 4-pole signs, and the petitioner, Whitehall Associates, requested a 5th sign. Whitehall Associates representative Michael Carmen stated another group applied for the 4th sign without permission from the petitioner. He argued the original outline plan for the PUD strictly states that only Whitehall Associates can apply for these permits.
This is just a general description of the PUD proposal, the outline plan of what was being proposed for this rezoning as a PUD. And this is all by Whitehall Associates. You don't see Brian Reynolds or anyone else involved. This is Whitehall Associates as the developer.
Board member Barry Clapper asked how permits are rewarded to PUDs with multiple owners. Development Services Manager Jackie Scanlon explained that any organization in the PUD meets the requirement to request a sign.
So the owner in this case, it's not one owner who owns the whole PUD, right? It's multiple owners. And the definition of owner says that persons, that it could be corporations. So the regulation for 4 signs is for the PUD. The PUD doesn't have single ownership anymore. Did it have single ownership in 1980 when it was, when that was approved, or however old this is? Maybe, but that has changed, and we feel like the allowance for the 4 signs was for the PUD as total. So an owner in the PUD requested a sign, and we can't not issue that sign. There's nothing that we can do to say that they don't meet the requirement, which is being in the PUD.
Board members denied the appeal unanimously. The Monroe County Solid Waste Management District Citizens Advisory Committee made plans to finalize its budget. At the May 20th meeting, committee member Joseph Winia recommended the committee meet for 2 work sessions to be prepared to present and vote on a budget at its next full meeting. Executive Director Tom Glasson cautioned that multiple sessions without quorum could violate local law.
Serial meetings is when when a governing body, to circumvent the open door law, meets in less than a quorum in a series of meetings, so that the chair or the vice chair meets with everybody but never in a quorum, and they reach a decision on something.
Committee member Randy Cox suggested forming a subcommittee to avoid those violations. McGlasson reassured committee members that an ad hoc subcommittee meeting would be fine. The next regular meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee will be June 20th. At the May 20th meeting of the Bloomington Board of Park Commissioners, Parks and Recreation Administrator Paula McDevitt presented a report on the Lower Cascades Road Pilot Project. She said a popular point of feedback was that the pilot coincided with the pandemic, resulting in an unrealistic amount of traffic around the closed road.
We did hear feedback that it wasn't the ideal time to try this pilot project, that traffic wasn't at its normal state. You know, schools shut down, IU emptied out, there were no performances, there was, people weren't traveling in. So the road wasn't being used in its normal way, and so there was some feedback that we were getting about that.
McDevitt continued that this feedback led to an extension of the pilot. This let residents give feedback on how the road's closure impacts people who live in the area.
We've had a lot of feedback on people no longer able to access the park by driving through it, that perhaps they have some mobility issues, that is how they enjoy the park, by just being able to drive through the park. We've had a lot of suggestions of putting in traffic calming devices and signage, because we get a lot of feedback that, some cars race down through there. So all in all, we're getting a lot of good feedback.
The Lower Cascades Road Pilot Program will continue for a few weeks. Feedback forms can be found on the Parks and Recreation section of the city's website. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.